This change to the story is one with bigger implications. The removal of the tailed beasts is the removal of a central plot point. Madara Uchiha once said that there were causal nexuses, and if you've been watching us long enough, you know I've referenced this before. You're a true OG if you can name a video where I said it. But essentially there are certain characters and plot points within the series that dictate where things go and how things work. Tailed beasts are one of those plot points. Without them, it's hard to see some things working in the same way, but that's the point of a what if. What would have happened if these events were changed and gone? And that allows the mind to run wild. So please, join me as we begin the next part of our story. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Snoring could be heard echoing through the house. An old woman by the counter sighed as she heard it. Breakfast had already come and gone. Looking out the window, she offered a bit of a smile, thinking on the bright side. He never really was cut out to be a shinobi. Maybe it's better that he doesn't become one, she said. She had tried to wake him, but was met with the same answer. 5 more minutes. Those became consecutive. Every 5 minutes, he would hit the snooze again and continue dreaming. 5 minutes was fine. Heck, even 10 was okay. But those snoozes really added up and they were now cutting into his day. Obito was flat on his back in what to him could have been the most comfortable bed in the world. Laying there, he drooled a river down the side of his face. That was until he heard the voice of his grandmother. Obito, I'm not gonna tell you again. Get up! Obito was roused from his sleep. He lay there for a minute and turned on his side. 5 more min. He yawned as his face turned toward the door. For a moment, he caught a glimpse of the clock. He smiled and closed his eyes and prepared to snooze once again until his groggy mind began to run the math. Suddenly, those eyes shot open as he looked at the clock. He had slept in for over an hour. He scrambled out of bed. I'm late! I'm late! He began a mad dash out the door and down the hall where his grandmother was waiting. His grandmother stood as he rushed past her. Wait, don't you want any breakfast? He was already gone by the time she finished her sentence. She sat back down with another sigh. Thinking about what happened to Obito's parents during the Second Shinobi World War, she began to wonder why Obito craved to become a shinobi so badly, especially when she had tried to tell him exactly what happened to them. But for some reason, the things that would scare any normal child instead gave Obito strength. Maybe a part of him believed it couldn't or wouldn't happen to him. Or maybe he just wanted to be like the ones he no longer had any memories of. A sort of connection to people he missed dearly. As she thought on these things, she looked over to the tea kettle, now hissing. She offered a smile. He's just like his father, I guess. Obito's frenzied dash saw him breaking the limits of what he thought his body could do. Tapping into hysterical strength, the slow twitch muscles in his legs began working overdrive, matching what might have only been possible for fast twitch. He was already tapping into his chakra reserves. Rushing down the street, his speed was enough that even the yellow flash of the leaf might blush. Obito came to a slow as he entered the gate to the academy. His heart dropped as he saw the other kids already leaving. I missed it. This was his last chance to enroll this year. His dreams were dashed. Well, that might have been overdramatic. It was just one more year to wait, and just because he didn't enroll as soon as possible didn't mean he couldn't catch up. The Konoha Academy, of course, was merit-based, not based on how long any one person was in school, meaning it was highly possible that one might actually be able to graduate early. So his dreams were hardly dashed, just paused for a while. But to Obito, this felt like the end of the world. His goggles pulled down on his face, he felt it hard to hold back. Tears were forming in his eyes, one of the greatest disappointments he'd ever felt, and it was all his fault. Maybe he didn't deserve to be a shinobi after all. Suddenly, a piece of paper was pushed into his chest. Looking down to his hand and the paper, he lifted it up to look at it. It was his name on the entrance papers to the academy. He looked up and saw Rin standing there with the greatest smile on her face. What's this? I went ahead and signed up for you. I knew you wanted to join, and when it looked like you might miss it, I took the liberty of signing you up myself. Obito's tears kept flowing, but the meaning was different now. These were tears of joy, of gratitude. He hugged Rin tightly. Thank you so much, Rin. What would I ever do without you? She smiled awkwardly as his hug was garnering the attention of others. It's no big deal, Obito. Now, what do you say we go celebrate? Obito's stomach growled. Can we celebrate with lunch? The academy was exactly as Obito thought it would be. A long list of subjects taught. subjects designed to make them well-rounded individuals with all the relative information needed about their world as well as their own history. But something else added into this particular academy that did not exist in any other school curriculum. This was the inclusion of chakra and ninjutsu training. Think about it like heavy-duty gym class, where how good you did in gym class factored into whether you passed or failed. It was probably worth about 50% of your score, and those who displayed above-average physical ability in conjunction with a mind that could understand all of the concepts meant to be taught would automatically graduate, regardless of how old they were or how long they'd been in the class. Enter Kakashi Hatake. He came from good stock, or so it had once been said. Genetically speaking, he was a prodigy. It seemed often that the term prodigy was used to describe certain students to the point that it lost its meaning, but Kakashi was fundamentally different. He had ability, he had control, he had knowledge, the amount of which caused Kakashi to no longer be able to be viewed as even in the same group as the other kids. Because of this, he was super popular, whether he liked it or not. But also because of this, he was despised by Obito. Originally, he hadn't given half a care about Kakashi's popularity, one way or the other, but it was when Rin started caring about Kakashi's popularity that Obito found he had to as well. The more she began to like Kakashi, the more Obito began to dislike him. To be frank, Obito was jealous of how Rin felt toward him. It was becoming increasingly obvious. He could deny it no longer. Rin had a crush on Kakashi, and Obito hated that. Obito had known Rin almost all of his life. They'd been best friends. From a young age where there was no real difference between boy and girl to their own knowledge. But as they grew older, these differences became more and more apparent, and Obito was developing strange feelings he had never had before and could hardly explain. He felt as though anything she wanted, he wanted, to a degree. He felt as though his day sucked unless she appeared in it at least once. His dreams were nothing but her, and on more than one occasion he'd wake up with her name on his lips. He wanted to die for her. He wanted to be her hero, but why was that? Why did he feel this way? He had thought about it for a long time. Was it simply because he was a good friend who enjoyed her presence? No, he thought about it. His desire to die for her wasn't just to be a good friend. He wanted to know that if he died for her, that she would miss him. He wanted to know that she couldn't live without him, because he surely couldn't live without her. On at least one occasion, he had taken these feelings to his grandmother, asking her why he felt this way and what it meant. His grandmother, proud of her charge, would pinch his cheeks like he was the cutest thing in the world, and would simply explain that he'd fallen in love. It was a new concept for a 10-year-old at the time, but she explained that love is the feeling you get when you know you're incomplete and begin searching for your other half. Love is born when you finally find that other half in someone else. Obito had found his other half. That part of him that made him say, "I can't live without you." Well, not literally. Ironically, the hardest thing for him to do was tell her that he couldn't live without her. He was afraid that she might think he was weird or wouldn't reciprocate. And watching how she fawned over Kakashi, he was caught between telling her and keeping it hidden. On one hand, her seeking companionship in Kakashi made it almost certain to Obito that she had not found that other half of herself inside of Obito, which meant that if he asked, she might say no. And if she said no, it would be like a knife through his heart, in a literal fashion. But at the same time, he was afraid that if the piece of her did exist in him and he said nothing, she would slip away and end up with Kakashi. I suppose what I'm saying is, Obito still had hope that she might like him. The uncertainty of her saying no meant that there was the possibility of a yes in there, and the fear of an actual answer kept him from asking. While it could so easily be yes and end up being the happiest thing in recent times to happen to him, it could also just as easily be no. And if it was no, then he might as well be crushed to death by a boulder somewhere. It felt like a life or death question, and he wasn't yet ready to ask it. What if, you know? All those what ifs played in his head and made him wonder, made him worry. Caught between a rock and a hard place, all he could do was ignore and despise Kakashi from a distance. But Wonder Boy's marvelism only grew as he graduated a year early. Good riddance was what Obito thought about it. He hoped that with Kakashi well out of Rin's sight, that maybe he would be out of her mind as well. But Kakashi's legend only grew. Despite no longer being present, his career was still under the gaze of the rest of the school, constantly building him up. Obito was paying attention too, starting to grow petty to a noticeable degree. Every time Rin or someone else would mention how great Kakashi was, Obito would drag up Kakashi's weaknesses and failures. Yeah, he graduated early, but he can't keep a team to save his life. He's such a stickler for the rules. I heard he even reported his own jonin 3 times in a single week for minor errors that even Hiruzen thought were stupid. Must be something wrong with the boy's brain. He's skilled, yeah, but he's crazy. Of course, Obito's ramblings never caught on. Instead, they only helped Kakashi's public view with the other academy students. They began to view him as studious. The more kids talked about Kakashi, the more Rin grew infatuated with the idea of him. Obito was almost happy when it was time to graduate. He hardly made it, but he made it indeed, and to his surprise, he'd be placed on a team with Rin Nohara. Obito felt like the luckiest man in the world. He had the one he loved all to himself on a shinobi team under Minato Namikaze, the next in line for the seat of Hokage. Obito felt as though he might be able to show off for Rin now. He was so excited. That was until he heard who the other member of their team was. Stupid Kakashi was Obito's only reaction. Me and Rin, I understand, but why did you pick Kakashi, Minato-sensei? Obito demanded this of his teacher in quiet. Haven't you heard what he's done? Why would you invite him onto a team when Kakashi will only attempt to make you look bad? You're being groomed to be the 4th Hokage. Why would you risk embarrassment with him who would literally report you for sneezing? Minato smiled. I'm not doing this for myself, Obito. I brought Kakashi onto the team because others gave up on him. He's studious and a bit of a stickler, and while I can't exactly call that a flaw, I can call it a weakness, because it shows his inability to be flexible. Not to mention, I thought you two might get along well. Well, you're crazy, Obito said. Minato offered a laugh. Well, I guess we'll see about that. For now, we need to test your abilities, make sure the team will still work well together. How are you going to do that, Obito asked. Minato's response was showing him the symbol of a long-standing tradition, a pair of bells tied to each other. These bells were for a team-building exercise, though it was customary not to explain as such to the students. He let Obito and the others think that this was a way to prove themselves. This led to Obito attempting to upstage Kakashi, trying to sabotage him in every way imaginable. But Kakashi must have maxed out his luck stat because he always seemed to be one step ahead, and Obito hated that. The only thing worse than someone acting like they were better than you is when they proved themselves right. Obito tried desperately to sabotage Kakashi, but in the end, Kakashi used these efforts to succeed. Minato would construe the events as attempts to help each other out when they were actually the exact opposite. Either way, he would pass them, and thus Team Minato was born. Kakashi and Obito would butt heads quite a bit during their time as genin. This didn't go unnoticed by Minato, who would call Obito to the side. I know you don't seem to get along very well with Kakashi, but I think you should try at least. How can I get along with someone like Kakashi? He's such a turd. Minato scoffed into a smile. Because he's not too dissimilar from you, Obito. Obito listened in with a downplayed amount of interest. Oh, he asked. How so? Minato began to tell Obito about Kakashi. Kakashi's father was the White Fang of the Leaf and a legendary fighter in the Second Shinobi World War, named Sakumo. He fought in a great many battles, much like your parents. But sadly, he died. Obito seemed concerned. How did he die? He took his own life. Minato looked down with a little bit of shame at how hard he'd been treating Kakashi. Minato continued. He lost his parents at a young age, just like you. I was hoping you and he would be able to find common ground in that and build a relationship with each other. Teamwork is one of the most important aspects of being a shinobi, so just promise me that you'll try to get along. Obito would nod. All right, I'll try. Minato would pat Obito's head. Good man. It was hard, and on many occasions Kakashi and Obito would butt heads, but Obito did at least try. As time passed by, Minato thought it was time to give the kids a chance to prove themselves. Considering how ahead of the curve Kakashi was, it only seemed right to allow his team to try the Chunin exams. He wasn't quite sure if Rin and Obito were ready, but he knew that Kakashi was, and if he was giving Kakashi the chance, it would only be right to extend the same to Rin and Obito. They would enter the Chunin exams and would make it through the first test. Then came the Forest of Death. This was where the worst of their problems really reared their ugly heads. With Minato around, Kakashi and Obito would get along well, but with Minato absent, they had to complete their mission on their own. They had to retrieve an Earth Scroll from an enemy team and escort it along with their Heaven Scroll to the tower in the center. The issue with this was that there immediately became a discourse among them as to the flow of the chain of command. They all agreed to an Alpha, Beta, Gamma system, with Rin already resigning herself to Gamma, despite Kakashi's insistence that she be Beta. For a moment, Obito almost respected Kakashi, until Kakashi mentioned that he himself should be Alpha, leaving Gamma to be filled by the only other member of their squad without a placement. Obito realized that Kakashi was insisting upon making Obito the Gamma. Hold up now, Kakashi, I'm not a Gamma. If anything, I'm the Alpha of this pack. I'm the oldest one here. Oldest maybe, but smartest, strongest, skilled? I think not, Kakashi said. Obito's temper flared. Maybe I'm not the most skilled, but at least I'm flexible as opposed to a stern, useless doorstop like you. Rin raised her hands. Okay guys, let's calm down here. I'm Gamma. I refuse to be anything but that. I'm not strong like you guys, I'm just a healer. I should stick to the back anyway. Rin said this in hopes of smoothing things over, but even though she raised the rank Obito likely would take to something he deserved, Obito was not happy. You've always been a jerk, Kakashi. I'm not letting you treat me like this. I'm the alpha, and that's all there is to it. Kakashi looked over. A useless crybaby like yourself can never make it as alpha. Just admit it. The only reason you're even here in the Chunin exams is because they wouldn't let me take it alone. You're here for me, not for any other reason. So just shut up and stay where you belong and let's get this over with. Obito's fists clenched. You're such an ass! I can't stand you, Kakashi. You're a jerk to everyone and you think you're better than everyone. There's a reason nobody wants you on their team. You're an annoyance to everyone. Hell, even your own father thought you were an annoyance. I'd kill myself too if I were your dad. The air suddenly shifted. Kakashi stood there, arms still crossed, but his face showed shock. Obito! Rin shouted as she punched him in the arm. Ow, hey, what's that for? Obito looked back to Kakashi, who gave a gaze that said, I hate you in it, but there was something more there, something he'd never seen in Kakashi. There was pain. Obito had sparred with Kakashi many times and fought with him many more, but this was the first time Obito could say he ever hurt Kakashi. But his honor was on the line now. He couldn't back down. Well, I mean, you're a jerk, Kakashi. You may be the only reason that we're here, but you won't be the reason why we graduate. I'll prove that I deserve to be here on my own. Kakashi stood there for a second before speaking. Fine, I'll prove it myself too. Kakashi then jumped off into the forest alone. Obito watched him go. Obito had finally gotten what he wanted. He got to be alpha, but at this point, it was bitter. Obito and Rin made their way through the forest of death. To say that he wasn't enjoying this alone time with Rin would have been a lie, but he would have enjoyed it more if she would speak to him. After taking a good few hours to search for an Earth Scroll to go along with their Heaven one, the sun began to set, and they decided to call it for the night. They still had a few more days before the test would conclude. Obito was trying his best to impress Rin. He would try to tell her jokes or say anything at all that might get her to look back at his pathetic attempts at wooing her, but in the end, she did refuse. She sat alone by the fire, eating what she had chosen to be her dinner, a fish that she had caught. He sat down by the fire and began attempting to eat a fish that she caught for him as well. So where do you think we should look tomorrow? I think near the river. Anywhere there's water, there's bound to be a settlement. Nothing can live without water, which makes it a prime location for hunting and gathering. She said nothing. Or maybe we could try closer to the tower, he said. Surely there'll be people there waiting in ambush to take the scrolls of someone who has them. The odds would be against us, especially now that stupid Kakashi isn't here, but at least we know we could find our target there. Still, Rin said nothing. Obito sighed. Will you at least talk to me? We're trying to survive here. Rin looked up at him through her eyebrows. I can't believe you said that to Kakashi today. Obito shook his head in confusion. That? I've said 10 times worse to him before. Have you? She asked. Obito nodded vigorously. I have. I told him once I wished he would die and have his body eaten by a swarm of fire ants. Sounds pretty bad to me. Rin shook her head. That's not anywhere near as bad as what you said today. Frankly, I'm appalled. Maybe you're not the person I thought you were. Obito was hurt. Why? Because I brought up his father? So what? My parents are dead too. You don't see me pissing and moaning about it. It's about how you said it, jackass, she said. Obito was shocked. He never heard Rin snap at him like that. Jackass. She then continued. You really don't know, do you? The reason why Kakashi is the way he is? Why he keeps getting kicked off of teams? Obito shook his head. Honestly, he didn't. Rin began to explain. Kakashi's father was perhaps one of the greatest shinobi to ever live. He loved his team to death and constantly bent rules to ensure that they were safe and cared for. One day, he had to choose between safeguarding their lives and completing a mission. He chose their lives and the mission failed. With that failure, Sakamo was ridiculed and disgraced. A lot of people died because of his failure, and the Hataka family name became just about as good as mud. Sakamo killed himself to restore honor to his family name. Kakashi was the one who discovered his father's dead body. Can you imagine that? Walking in on your only parent to find that they've committed suicide? He was 5. Obito sat there. I didn't know that. Rin scoffed. I'm sure you didn't, but it doesn't excuse what you said today. You need to make this right, Obito. If Kakashi doesn't forgive you, neither will I. That hit like a freight train. That night, as they slept, despite Rin being by his side, sharing a blanket with him, he couldn't sleep. His conscience was eating at him too hard. He would eventually rise to his feet in the night and would tuck Rin under the blanket. He would exit the cave they were using as cover and would begin making his way out. It was by pure luck that he found Kakashi's camp. Kakashi was cleaning his blade after having used it to serve up dinner for himself. Obito landed a ways behind him. He was silent as he watched. Kakashi didn't even turn around. He simply spoke. "Get out." Obito didn't. "I won't." "Then I'll throw you out," Kakashi said. "Kakashi, I wanted to talk about today." Kakashi was silent. Obito began to formulate what he was going to say. He wasn't sure how to begin, so he just started. "Kakashi, I didn't know about your father when I said what I did. I didn't truly understand him or you. I was angry at you, and I said something in an attempt to hurt you, to make you feel how I was feeling. And I crossed a line that I shouldn't have. I never should have touched the topic of your father. I guess what I'm saying is I'm sorry." Kakashi scoffed. Apology not accepted. Obito was shocked. Wait, what? You can't do that. I apologized. You gotta accept it." "No, I don't. Get out of my camp, you joke, before I throw you out myself." Suddenly there was a scream in the background, a familiar scream. "Rin," Obito said. Kakashi stood. "You left her unprotected?" Obito's face began to grow red with embarrassment. It was nighttime. I assumed everyone would be asleep by now." Kakashi punched Obito in the arm, drawing a reaction. "Ow! You idiot," Kakashi said. "It's nighttime when shinobi are most active. This is when we call the week. In fact, I was about to do some hunting myself." "We don't have time to argue," Obito said. "We gotta get Rin." And so the two raced back to the cave where they found Rin out in the grass, covering the scroll of heaven with her body, 3 other shinobi standing behind her.
"Look, girlie, we don't want to hurt you, but we will if you don't hand over that scroll."
She looked back. "I'll die before I betray my team," she shouted. The shinobi looked at each other.
"We may not be genies, but that is one wish we can grant."
They began to approach her with murderous intent. They had all signed a waiver. This, in their eyes, was leeway to committing murder. The bloodlust and the grip of their kunai told Rin she was about to die. Just as they got close to her though, Kakashi rushed in with the speed of his lightning-style nature, striking one in the cheek so hard that he flew into a tree and passed out. Obito appeared not long afterward. Together, Obito and Kakashi managed to defeat the shinobi harassing her. Rin ran to Kakashi and gave him a hug. This was hard for Obito to watch, so he simply looked away. He had screwed up his only chance with her, and now he was getting what he deserved. Suddenly, he felt a pair of warm lips press against his cheek. "Thank you, Obito." He turned as red as a lobster. "Well, I couldn't help but think about what you said, and I knew you were right, so I went to apologize to Kakashi, and I'm sorry I left you all alone. I was wrong. Are you okay?" She smiled. "I am now. They wanted to take our scroll, but I protected it." "I'm so proud of you," Obito said. "If you two are done, I got some good news," Kakashi said. He lifted up an earth scroll. "I pilfered these idiots' scroll. Now we can pass the test, but we need to get to the tower. I don't think we should wait, especially now that our camps have been discovered. Let's just go now." Obito and Rin both nodded their heads. Kakashi smiled. Despite everything, he was the alpha. Whether they wanted to admit it or not, they were taking his orders now, and maybe Obito knew it was right deep down. After all, he left Rin alone, and that was a mistake. Maybe he was accepting Kakashi's position because he knew that he'd just screw it up if he didn't. Either way, Kakashi was the alpha, and that was all that mattered. In the end, they would make it to the tower and would get the next few days off, which Obito would use to catch up on sleep and stay as sharp physically for the next few rounds. The next rounds were exhibition rounds, which Obito did fairly well in, but sad as it was, he ended up being defeated by Might Guy, who would go on to face Kakashi, who would soundly beat him. This led to Kakashi becoming a Chunin, but poor Obito was passed over. The words of Kakashi rang out in Obito's head. "You're only here because of me." He was down in the dumps for quite some time, but Rin would tell him to buck up. He would be able to make it. So Obito spent the entire year training, working his body to the bone, increasing his strength, his prowess in ninjutsu. He didn't stop, even when he felt he might die. He pressed on and became as strong as he possibly could. Then the day came where he might try again to reach Chunin, and he did manage to pass the test. As he went to tell his team to celebrate though, he was immediately overshadowed by Kakashi, who managed to get his Jonin rank, becoming perhaps the youngest Jonin in all of Konoha's history. Rin was so taken by Kakashi, and once again, jealousy began to fester in Obito's heart. Everyone had gotten Kakashi a gift, but Obito didn't. Obito had been too focused on getting his Chunin rank that he didn't even know Kakashi was aiming for Jonin, so he said he simply forgot. Kakashi, despite putting on a tough exterior, was a little hurt by this. Not that he cared much for any gift from him, but perhaps Kakashi deep down just wanted to know that Obito cared, and felt as though he didn't. "That's fine. Anything you would have gotten me would have been useless anyway," Kakashi said. Oh yeah, that sparked a disagreement alright, but as the wars raged on, Rin, Kakashi, and Obito would be sent to the front lines. They'd be given the special mission to destroy Kanabi Bridge, as it was an integral supply line for Iwagakure, and its destruction would force Iwa into a position to negotiate peace. But as the mission was about to begin, Minato was called away by an SOS. He would give the mission over to Kakashi, much to Obito's chagrin. Not that Obito himself could lead, but skepticism, likely based on envy, abounded within his mind as he declared that Kakashi was unfit. Not willing to listen to another argument start in the middle of a battlefield, Minato looked to Obito. Kakashi is a Jonin. He's past Konoha's standards for leading a mission like this, and he has my trust. You will follow his orders to the letter. Respect him as you would respect me. Obito begrudgingly agreed to this. Minato smiled. I know you three will make me proud. He then disappeared. The three would begin to head for the bridge, but along the way they would encounter another three-man squad, this time Iwanin. They would manage to kill one of their enemy's teammates, but in response, the Iwanin managed to capture Rin. Kakashi, now forced into the same position as his father was in, refused to go after Rin, choosing the mission above her. How can you do that? Obito asked. She's our teammate, our friend. Have you never heard the phrase, leave no man behind? Kakashi looked back. Obito, I need you to use your brain for once. We're in the middle of a real war. Ideals and romantics have no place here. Only hard decisions. I can choose one person and sacrifice countless others, or I can choose the mission at the expense of one person. Who says it has to be the end of the mission? It's just a detour. We rescue Rin and finish it. No, Obito, I won't risk it. She knew what she was getting into. We complete the mission, and then if we have time, we'll rescue Rin. But by that time it'll be too late, Obito cried. Then I guess that's just the hand we were dealt. Kakashi turned to leave when Obito stopped him. No, I refuse to leave without her. Kakashi sighed. Obito, the mission comes first. We can't stop what we're doing to pick up dead weight. Obito's eyes widened. What did you just call her? Kakashi raised his hands to calm Obito. I know how you must feel, but Obito's knuckles collided with Kakashi's jaw before he could even finish his sentence. Kakashi hit the ground, startled by the strength Obito had conglomerated since the Chunin exams. Obito stood there. You know, maybe it is sad that your father killed himself, but I will say one thing. He was a wise leader. I don't care what Konoha says about him. He chose to save his friends, and that, to me, makes him a hero. What he was is everything I aspire to be, even if you've lost faith. They may call him scum, and they'll probably one day call me scum too. But if you ask me, people who leave behind even one of their friends are worse than scum. If I'm scum either way, I might as well save my friends, and I'll destroy any so-called shinobi who would try and stop me. If you're so dead set on completing this mission now, then go do it by yourself. I'm going after Rin. Obito rushed off. Kakashi extended his hand out. Obito, wait. It was too late. He was already gone. Kakashi stood. If that's how you're gonna be, then fine. I'll do it myself. Kakashi turned and continued toward Kanabi Bridge. However, halfway there, he stopped in a tree limb, the words of Obito ringing in his ears. Kakashi looked back. He began thinking about his father, about Obito, and most of all about Rin. Cursing under his breath, he turned around and began running back in the direction of his team. At about this time, Obito was facing off against Taiseki, the Iwanin who could use camouflage to his advantage. Despite being a Chunin, Obito was no match. He couldn't help it. He just couldn't see the attacks coming. And as Taiseki was about to strike him down, he accepted his fate. However, before he could, Kakashi came through, blocking the shot. Taiseki managed to get one on Kakashi though and wounded him, cutting out his left eye. Kakashi! Obito shouted. In that moment, the gravity of what happened, the pressure of rescuing Rin, and now the responsibility in needing to protect Kakashi who had just sacrificed so much to save him, all of it came together and stood before Obito as a question. Obito's answer was determination. Determination and action. With those two decisions mixing in his heart, he stood and ditched his goggles as his Sharingan awakened for the first time. Taiseki believed that his camouflage would protect him, but Obito's new Sharingan allowed him to see what was coming, and he managed to stab his opponent, killing him before he could be attacked. Obito ran to Kakashi. Are you okay? Kakashi stood and found he couldn't open his eye. The pain was intense. He was certain he was blind there, but he couldn't just sit there and cry. He had a mission to complete. He stood. Let's just finish the mission, Kakashi said. Together they would go in with Obito and attack Kako to rescue Rin. It seemed that Kako was overwhelmed and would lose, so he fled the area. They rescued Rin, but before they could get out, the bitter Kako would begin bringing down the cave. As the cave started to fall, they ran for the exit, only for Kakashi, who was normally very observant, to get beamed in the head with a falling stone, one that landed right in his blind spot. Seeing Kakashi in danger, Obito sprang into action. He ran back to Kakashi and helped him up. Throwing him on his shoulder, Obito summoned his will and ran for the exit. But as he did so, the cave's structural integrity gave way, and it began to completely collapse. Knowing that they wouldn't make it, Obito used the last of his strength to throw Kakashi as hard as he could, as the stones crushed Obito. Kakashi and Rin cried out for him. Kakashi began to feverishly dig into the collapsed rock, trying to dig Obito out. He managed to find Obito laying there, but he was pinned, the entire right side of his body having been crushed. Obito laid there and looked up into the skies. Oddly enough, he didn't feel any pain, but he knew he was dying. He looked over and saw Rin there, tears streaming down her cheeks as she tried to comfort him. Of course, Obito oddly was already comfortable enough. All the same, she tried to do it for her own sake. Obito thought back on his life, seeing flashbacks of everything he had thought. How much he loved the girl who was now crying over him, and he felt content. He had always known deep in his heart that he would die for someone he loved, but he never expected it to be Kakashi. To think that if he had left Kakashi behind, Obito would have been able to be with Rin, but instead he'd given his life for him. It was hilarious, but sad all the same. He'd always wanted to be married to Rin, and now his dreams were gone. Despite that, he was okay. Just seeing her reaction, despite it being filled with pain, there was comfort there. He finally got his acknowledgement. He finally got his answer. She loved him. There was no way that she couldn't with the reaction she was giving. She could hardly breathe, she was crying so hard. Her hand was trembling fiercely as it gripped his. Even Kakashi was crying. Obito smiled a bit. Who would have thought, after all these years, all these fights, all these attempts to hurt Kakashi, the worst pain I could ever inflict upon him was dying. He offered them comfort, and there he confessed his love for Rin, a love which she admitted that she reciprocated. As for Kakashi, he apologized for always being so hard on him, and admitted that he was always a little jealous. He apologized for that which Kakashi told him not to. In the end, Obito would offer to give Kakashi his Sharingan, which at first Kakashi refused. But upon telling him that it was the gift he would give him for becoming a Jonin, Kakashi allowed it. Rin would transplant the eye to Kakashi as per Obito's desires. But now, Obito was in total darkness. A part of him was terrified, but he still had Rin holding his hand. She kissed his cheek. I'm here for you, Obito, she told him, but as they waited, sounds could be heard in the distance. A rumbling. They were surrounded by Iwanin. Rin, we have to go, he shouted. She refused. I won't leave him. Obito smiled. Rin, go, he said. It's okay. I'll be okay. She shook her head. I won't let you die alone. He smiled once more. Rin, I would rather die alone than die with you and Kakashi bleeding out beside me. I'll be fine. Go. Kakashi pulled her away, kicking and screaming, her sorrow burning deep in Kakashi's heart. Obito, she screamed. The pain in her heart as well as the pain in his own. The pain in Kakashi's as well as the pain in Obito's heart awakened within Kakashi's eye the Mangekyo Sharingan. With this powerful dojutsu, Kakashi managed to eradicate all of the Iwanin before passing out. Minato would appear not long after to find Rin crying. Kakashi passed out among the bodies littered about him. She pointed to the stones. Minato walked over and found Obito. He considered teleporting Obito out from under the stones with the flying Raijin, but Minato decided not to. The boy's wounds were too great, and he knew that doing something like that would only cause him pain. As it stood, it was better for him to remain there. It was better to let him die in relative comfort than to die in agony, free from the stones. He knelt down. Obito. There was silence for a moment. Obito, it's me. Minato. Obito's left eye socket opened for a split second before closing again, remembering that he couldn't see through it. Minato-sensei. Are you in pain, Obito? Obito thought he shook his hand, but nothing happened. No. Minato took Obito's hand gently. He stroked it. He was attempting to hold it together. His voice was calm and sure, but Obito felt something wet. Was it sweat? He tried to convince himself that it was sweat. His master would never cry. Obito was wrong. Minato's face bore the same pain as Rin. Obito spoke. They captured Rin. We had to rescue her. I know, Obito. You don't have to explain. I understand. I did my best, Obito said. I know you did. A moment passed before Obito spoke again. Did I do good? Minato looked at the boy who was already pale as a ghost. He nodded. Yes, Obito, you did great. I'm so proud of you. Obito smiled. Thank you, Minato-sensei. Obito let out his breath. He was gone. The service was short. Konoha simply didn't have enough time to hold a proper funeral for every shinobi. After all, Obito was only one of a few hundred scheduled to be buried that day. But his story was one that burned through Konoha like wildfire. He was thus posthumously named Jonin and put upon a plaque of Konoha's greatest heroes. Kakashi and Rin continued their service until the war ended. By that point, Minato would become the next Hokage. Obito would not be forgotten by the two, and always remembered. And that's the end of today's video. I know, you're sad, but don't worry, I'm not done yet. I've still got more to tell, so I hope you'll join me for it later. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button to let us know so. And don't forget to drop a comment below to tell us what you might like to see next. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when more videos like this one drop in the future, and until next time, peace out.